Good day to everybody in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Basse Update. And to my right, Larry Knutsen's with me today. Welcome, Larry.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning. And we're going to talk a little bit about past event, our Heritage Holiday, which was on December 15th from 1 to 5 p.m. at the site. We're going to talk about some upcoming events. We've got our ice harvest at Nepco Lake, part of the Port Edwards Lions Fishery. And then we also have, after that, we have our winter feast, which will be on February 16th at the Nakusa Community Center. So we're going to kind of cover all three of those things this morning. So first we're going to start out with the Heritage Holiday, which was on December 15th from 1 to 5 p.m. at the site. And I know, Larry, you were in the bunkhouse. You and at least Jim Nickel were there for a while. Then he departed. Why don't you tell just your perspective from the bunkhouse for the guests that came and visited us?
Well, we were kind of anxious in the beginning of the morning because it was a little slow in the beginning, but it was such a beautiful day. Mm-hmm. I actually had the door of the bunkhouse open. It was warmer with the door of the bunkhouse open because the sun was shining in and it was so
getting
nice
some
and warm
solar
there,
heat there. Yes.
Yeah, as you say, Jim and I were in the bunkhouse, and I had my presentation with all the items that I have as a Norwegian immigrant that I hunt for part of my living for making extra money out there. And then Jim was our in-resident Santa Claus for the year. But Jim's portrayal of a Santa Claus is a little different than what you see down at Walmart or some of the Santa stores and things like that. So Jim is dressed as the old-time Santa,
mm-hmm.
you know. So I would give my presentation to the people as they came in, and then Jim was in there and he would give his presentation. But two of us in the bunkhouse we found is a little tight, and some of the people because we like to talk about our stuff so much, you know,
so which we're supposed to.
Right, yeah. It gets a little long for some. So Jim decided to go outside because it was such a beautiful day, and so then Jim was outside and he was able to talk to many, many people out there.
Yeah, it was kind of a meet and greet on the outside.
Correct.
I think originally, if it would have been a really cold day, they would have still been worked out really well, and people would have been more likely to come inside to warm up and would have spent more time. But
I
with
think
two presentations in one building, if the weather was nice, you know, they wanted to move on probably. And
I think the people were enjoying our hot chocolate that we had on site
Yes.
out there, so they were probably going back for seconds on that. You know.
Yeah, it was a good day. I'd like to thank everybody that attended our Heritage Holiday on December 15th. I'd like to invite those that haven't to come back and see what an old-fashioned Christmas is like. But I got to tour, I think, every building on the site, and it was a great, from the schoolhouse where they had making a snowman project and explaining the schoolhouse as it is portrayed to the public, and that was great. And then Johan was in the barn. He was interpreting the barn and what goes on in the barn, the corn shelling and different activities that took place in the barn. And Johan kind of loves this stuff anyway. And then Ted was out in the open area with the hot chocolate and was dispensing hot chocolate and talking to people about different things. As you're around the site, I think, Larry, you've noticed people ask you, even if you're not in your building, they'll say, well, what about this? So you get to explain a little bit more of everything. And Don was doing Jacob's ladders in the 3-bay workshop there and in the 3-bay shed, and that was kind of nice, and people are really enthused about it because normally when you go someplace you make a small little craft, and then when you go away from it you can maybe take it with you. But the Jacob's ladder is kind of a substantial thing, you know, with the wood involved in the fabric and everything that they put together on it. It was kind of nice.
And originally it was intended for children. Don was going to make them and have the children make them and stuff, but it ended up for a few adults too,
Yes,
because they enjoyed it so much.
Yeah,
So.
and they could take part in the project because I noticed some kids were doing some nailing and some people were taking part in different projects. It was kind of a learning experience at first for Don because I think Jim Nickel had kind of put it together and Don kind of understood it, but he had to kind of go through that. I think Jim helped him a little bit in the morning to get set with that. And then We had Ken Harchie, who was our resident blacksmith. He was in the blacksmith shop, and I think he had both fires going, probably to keep him a little warmer there. He had his hearth going where was doing the blacksmithing, and then behind him he had a stove with some wood in it, and so that was going on. And then Tom Bramer was out in the trader's cabin and talking about the events and things that went on in the trader's cabin, also about how they celebrated Christmas. We know that Christmas was celebrated a lot different in the early days, the trading post days that they had there previous to probably when the Wakeleys came, maybe the late 1700s up through maybe 1820, 1830. And then the Wakeleys day, things changed a little bit more. And then, of course, we went to the house, and the house was very nice and warm. In fact, when I was running around with my bear coat, it was a little hot in there, to say the least. And I think for the gals there, it was about perfect because they were in their aprons and their dresses, and probably just the perfect temperature. But they were doing some baking and providing different samples of food to people, and they're showing crafts. They had people upstairs that were doing things, and the Girl Scouts were involved and everything. So it was a nice overall event. I think a lot of people got a lot of good idea of what Historic Point Basse is about. We always talk about those events like Heritage Holiday and Sugar Bush, those events on the bookcase ends of our year, that it's kind of a nice day to come out, because when you come out, you can spend some more time asking more questions. When we're busy in the middle of our Pioneer Festival, well, we're all going and we got hundreds of guests, and it's a little bit harder to spend time with people. So this was an event we could spend time with.
That's what we're hoping. We've been discussing at our meetings that we have at Point Basse, is that we're hoping to get people out there that would want to dress up. We do have loaner garb, or loaner clothing, I should say, for people that would be interested in trying out Point Basse. And we would like people just out there walking around with their period clothing on and things like that. And we can give you a little insight on general topics to talk about and things like that. But I think it's a nice opportunity for people that don't want to dive in head first, like some of us have in the past. But just want to kind of feel what it's like and get a little feeling for that type of event out there.
Yeah, and we encourage that sort of thing unless you want to, we don't believe in immersion. We believe that you should come out, take a look, see what we're doing, maybe not even in historic clothes. And if you'd like to get dressed up and maybe you're thinking about a character someday, you want to come out and just help people, like whether it's in the house or in the schoolhouse or cabin or wherever it happens to be, you can get involved with it and then decide at what level, if you'd like to do that, or if you want to be behind the scenes person. We need those people too. So it's a good opportunity to kind of see what it is. And I think out of this Heritage Holiday, we had a couple people that I think were from down Adams Friendship area or something that were very much interested in and have thought about coming back and maybe participating in what we're doing. So we're open to all that sort of thing. Next event, Larry, we got coming up, we got our ice harvest, which is on Nepco Lake, part of the Port Edwards Lions Fishery, and that's on January 27th. It's a Sunday, a little different for us. We're normally Saturdays or Fridays and Saturdays or something like that, but this is a Sunday, and we partake in as part of the Port Edwards Lions Fisheries, and like to put a big thank you out to them for having us to be a part of their event year to year. I think this is maybe 7th or 8th year out there, maybe 10th year. I don't remember anymore, but it's been a lot of years out there, and it's worked really well for us because they've got public coming, so they're ready as a ready-made, event happening. So we don't have to create an event. They're there doing the fishery, or they're going out and just walking around, or they're going to the chili dump that they have in the shelter house and that sort of thing. So it's a good event for us to partake in. Now we do cut ice. We start at 10 a.m. and we cut till, we're basically on the ice till 1 p.m. And then from 11 to 3, we pack the ice at the site. So you got two different things you can do there, or you can do both of them if you like. At the site at Nepco Lake from 10 to 1, help us cut ice, load the ice, that sort of thing, partake, watch us do it. If you don't want to do it, we'd encourage you, if you want to do it, we'll certainly encourage you to do that. And then afterwards, if you want to go see how that ice is packed in the ice house, this past Thursday, Larry and I and several other members went and shoveled a lot of sawdust, so we got 2 big loads of sawdust from Golden Eagle Log Homes, and thanks to Golden Eagle and Zach Parmenter for donating that sawdust to us. So that ice has to be packed with sawdust all around it to preserve it, so that's natural insulation. And you might wonder, why sawdust? Well, we know that some places they use straw, but sawdust was ideal because in this area where they're doing lumbering, the sawmills have a lot of extra, what they consider almost waste material, and to get rid of it, you could use it for in the ice harvest part of it. So for the packing of the ice with the insulative qualities of the sawdust. So we got a few pictures to show here. Maybe have Jim Nichols behind the camera today and have him hone in on that. This is a picture at the site, was taken several years ago, but that shows pulling out a block. We have our area enclosed by a fence, and the fence is there mainly for safety purposes. We don't want snowmobiles to go through there after we just cut the ice. The ice will be pretty thin for a while until it thickens up again. But this is a big block pulled out here. You can see there's several people standing around. This is actually not a standard block. This is probably 3 blocks in one. So that's not the normal type we have. And what you can see is right behind the block here is several people cutting ice. So there's 3 big saws and people are cutting ice, coming and going, cutting it diagonally and vertically. And so you can see there they're cutting the ice with this big block that's just pulled out. And we got another picture here. And this is pretty much the same picture, but it just hones in on the block of ice itself. Now you can see that's, I'm just guess estimating, probably 14 to 16 inches thick, and that looks to me like 36, 40 inches long. That'll be probably cut into 3 individual blocks. This block is kind of nice to pull out of the water if you can do it. It's a lot of weight, but to pack it away, it's too heavy. That probably weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 200, 250 pounds. So we like to get those blocks down to like 75, 80 pounds or so. And here you see, I think that's a picture of the same block, but you see the ice saws in the background going up and down, and they're still cutting behind there vertically and horizontally. And just to give you some idea, if you don't make it out, some of you folks may be such that you don't want to walk on ice, or you maybe have little mobility problems. This just gives you an idea of what we're doing at the site. And then we brought some tools along today. Larry, you want to talk about these are tongs.
Yeah, these are ice tongs. Of course, you need to pull the ice out of the water when you cut it. And as you've seen in the picture, the tongs that Mike has here are the tongs for the very big blocks, so you could reach them and pull them out of the water. These tongs are the smaller tongs, which you would use for the smaller blocks. Of course, they could only be that big, you know.
And you can see
so you
can see how big this one can pull out.
Yeah.
So it's got a bigger mouth on it.
So there are multiple tools for different purposes as you do the ice harvest. And sadly to say, we do have a pair of tongs in the bottom of Lake Nepco for about 3 years ago.
Yeah, we know about where it's located, but for some reason we just haven't located it yet.
Taken a magnet out there,
Yeah,
so we'll do that someday.
Yeah.
But these tongs used for multiple things, but mainly for ice harvest.
And the tongs are kind of interesting. When we got a little sawdust and stuff on here, but when we go out and a lot of these tongs were donated by members of the community here that were interested in our projects, and some we've bought over the years. But the interesting thing about ice harvesting equipment is that it's really not made anymore in any respects. So basically most everything you buy is antique. And the only competition we really have with antiques is probably the Amish. The Amish still cut ice on ponds and that sort of thing. And so everybody else is collecting them, and this is a trim saw. You want to catch that in there? This is a trim saw, and you can see, if you could see it here, I don't think you can see it, but it's got Johan Hulleman does the saw blades for us, and he puts a kerf on it. So one blade is is in and another blade is out, so it actually cuts fairly aggressively. And the difference between this and a saw that's used for wood is it's much thicker, it's much heavier because the ice is harder and chances of it bending are much greater, so it's much harder. This one also has a metal handle. One Larry's holding over on that end is a metal handle. And we've got, I think, 2 or 3 of these trim saws. What we do, like when you saw that big picture previously of that big block coming out of the water, we'll trim a lot of times with these smaller trim saws. And then we trim down, and then we use, we can show you here another, we got a kind of a spike that just breaks it. So when you trim down so far on the ice and you cut down so far, you don't have to cut all the way. You can use something like this. You can put it down into that crack that you made by the cut, and it'll crack it apart, and usually fairly straight if you go far enough down. If you go not far enough down, then you'll get sometimes an odd look to it or something. But Larry and I were talking before the show started today, and Larry was saying it looks a lot like log peeler.
A barking spud.
Barking spud.
Yeah.
And it could well be. Now, this came to us, I think, as a donation. We use it for ice. It's built fairly heavily, but it could be just as well used for barking spud, where they go along the tree and take the bark off of it. And this is fairly heavy, and it's a little less work because it's got a long handle, but not real long, so it's easier to use.
I've used that at Ice Harvest. It works great for one purpose. And if in the picture here that Mike showed earlier, I don't know if you can see this or not, but on each block of ice, the top part of the ice is white, and the rest of the ice is nice and clear. That white part that's on there, you do not want on the ice if you're going to keep the ice, because it melts too fast and it takes up too much room, and it's not good ice. So you score at that intersection of the clear ice and the white ice. You score that with that, and then you take this spud and you hit it, and it really does a nice job of
the problem with the ice,
taking that white off.
like Larry was talking about, that's kind of like crystallized ice. It's not really good quality. The other stuff is like pure, like ice cube ice, and that's what we want, because that stuff takes up, usually is only like 2 or 3 inches, maybe 4 inches on top of the block itself, but it takes up space and it doesn't last. We know it'll be gone probably in 3-4 months. It's not going to last into the summer when we need the ice and that sort of thing.
Hard ice.
Yeah, right. And then I'm going to stand up for this final saw here. This is one of our regular big ice cutting saws. Watch, it's a little sharp there.
Yeah.
Johan does a good job of sharpening, but you can see it. Now the difference between this, I always tell people when they come out to the site, and a wood saw is it's only got one handle, because we haven't found anybody who wants to handle the bottom end
Underneath.
because you'd be, of course, under the water. So it's kind of a joke. But you can see it's all heavy built, very heavy. You can see the teeth are very large and separated a lot. Now, until Johan started sharpening these saws, I used to believe mostly that they cut by friction. That means that you had to do a lot of strokes to get any cutting done, because it was cutting by friction, heat, that sort of thing. Now that Johan's got a pretty good kerf on most of these saws, they actually cut very efficiently, and then it makes it much quicker for us. Normally we're dealing with anywhere from 12 to 20, 22 inches of ice. This year, so far, I think we've got 6 or 8 inches of ice out at Nepco Lake, and we're hoping for some good frost in the next couple weeks. We still got about 3 good weeks yet before we have to worry about it. We've had it where we had 6 inches of ice a week before, and we ended up with like 18 inches of ice. So it happens real fast when it does happen. And this is, Larry, just a little.
They would be what they would, I guess we would call it an ice shaver, because when you put the blocks in the ice house, the blocks have to be nice and square and flat. We put sawdust over them, but if you ever put ice on top of ice, it goes boop like that. It slides off if it's not nice and level. So to level the blocks up, we can shape them a little bit with this when they're in the smaller chunks, if we need to take off a little bit here and there. And we also use wedges out there to keep the blocks uniform, so they're not sliding out when we pile them up and we put the sawdust on. You need to make sure they're nice and straight, just like any building block, that you've had since you were kids.
This is Legos for adults, folks.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's little intricacies like that you'll learn if you come out and that you don't really realize until you actually do it.
Yeah. Like we mentioned before, we welcome you to come out and help if you like. Just come out and watch us do it if you don't want to do that. We have surprisingly a lot of people that come out and just sit on the other side of the fence. In fact, tomorrow, we're taping this on a Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, looks to be like about 10 degrees above zero or something. We're gonna we put it off for Monday because we had the big rain mounts on Monday. It would have been like working in a puddle out there on the ice. But on Wednesday, tomorrow morning, we're going to put up our fence that we surround the area with, and if there's any snow or something, we'll push it off to the side, and we'll put up our fence so that fence can freeze in place and reserve that area so that we don't get a lot of snowmobile tracks or the ice fishermen putting holes in it. And it's not a huge area. It's probably 20 by 20 or a little less than that even. So it's just that area. We normally harvest about 40 blocks of ice if it's a good size, and good depth of ice. And 40 blocks fits in our ice house pretty well. And that'll give us about 6.5, 7 foot high of ice storage. And then we put sawdust in between it and around it. And of course, in the walls of the ice house, there is sawdust too. And then on the top, we'll cover it totally with ice. Sawdust. Yes. So you want to come out? That's the 29th of January. 27th of January. 27th of January. It's the last Sunday in January. It used to be Super Bowl Sunday, and that's when the Port Edwards Lions had their fishery. Of course, then we know changed Super Bowl to the first week of February.
A person may ask too. I mean, this is a lot of work. It really is. It's a lot of work to harvest the ice and get prepared and haul it down there and everything else. And you may wonder, why are we doing this? It's for demonstration purposes. Is one item that is the reason we harvest it, because it's something they did back in the Wakely era. Okay. The other purpose is we actually use the ice. The ice we use to make ice cream during the summertime. If anybody that's made homemade ice cream, you need ice around the outside of the container to freeze the ice when you're in the middle of summer.
Yes.
And so we use the ice for that. We also use the ice, if I'm not mistaken, for cooling drinks.
Yeah.
The
drinks
not
are
in
all
the drinks themselves,
yeah.
but just for cooling the drinks and stuff. And this goes until what, September?
Some years we'll keep it to September, but usually we have a good presence of ice into July.
Yeah.
And then it starts, depending on how warm the summer is. If you have a
Right.
really, extremely hot summer, it's probably done 2 or 3 weeks after Pioneer Fest. But usually at Pioneer Fest time, like I talked about, we have 6.5, 7 foot of ice. We still have 5 foot of ice at Pioneer Fest. We've only lost about a foot of it. So,
Yeah.
so it's a good amount. And like Larry says, it's a practical thing. It's something the Wakeleys would have done. We know that. Probably they've done it on the creek or the river. We just don't feel it's safe enough for public to come out and enjoy that, doing it on the river or on the creek, the Wakely Creek that's at the site, unfortunately. And we did it previously a couple of years on one time. The first year was on a pond that was in the town of Saratoga, and then we did it at the Cranberry Marshes directly across from the Wakely on County Trunk C. We did it there for a year or two. That was good, but because of liability purposes and everything, it was kind of hard to get the public in there. Plus, with their beds, we didn't want to disturb their beds or get traffic in the wrong places and stuff, and so it was a little constraining. So when the Port Edwards Lions contacted us about if we'd like to do it there, it was perfect for us. It was a marriage made in heaven. So if you'd like to come out, that's January 27th, 10 till 1. We have a presence on the ice. We cut usually about 2 hours. We've got pretty much everything pretty well cut, I think, by noon. And the first vehicle goes down about 11 o'clock to the site, and then we start packing it in the 3-bay shed. And you're welcome at either spot if you'd like to watch some of that progress. Ice is one of those strange things, we really take it for granted, and it's really something that in the pioneer days, the Wakely days, they just didn't have it to take for granted. They had to have an ice house, they had to keep ice, for keeping their dairy products cool during the summer and meats and different things like that. And one of those things now we can go up to our refrigerators, depending on what you have at home. Maybe they got an ice cube maker. I mean, all those things we kind of take for granted, they just didn't have it. And ice harvesting actually was like the second or third biggest commodity during the early years of our country. We shipped a lot of ice up until the early 1900s to India and to the Caribbean and all over the world, because people had gotten used to ice in their home country, and now they desired it, and so America shipped a lot of it. Now you might say, how can you ship ice to India? Well, they had such a mass of it that by the time they got there, sure, they lost a third of their cargo, but they still had 2/3 left. And ice, really, other than the labor, doesn't cost anything, and the shipping cost. So it was quite a profitable business for quite a few number of years. So one of those kind of forgotten things that I think it puts us in touch. Also, for me, probably for Larry and most people that work there, you don't realize how physical this is. This is a physical project. I mean, and Larry and I, we're not physical by any means anymore or anything, and no, even in our jobs we're physical, but this is what I call work.
It's what you paid for the luxury of having ice.
Yes.
Yes. It's the price you paid. You didn't get it for free.
And we all remember those days, or maybe don't remember, but remember hearing of those days when the Iceman used to come around. He had a little sticker in your window, and it said what you wanted. It was like a 5 or a 10 or 15 or 20 on that little piece of wood, and you switched it around depending. The Iceman knew you wanted a 5-pound block or 10-pound block, because that's when we had the old ice chests. Didn't have refrigeration, but they were cooled because of the ice in the unit itself. And so up until probably the 30s and 40s, those icemen were going around. It's kind of like the old milkman. The horse pulling the wagon would pull it right up. He knew exactly where the stops were for the Iceman because he had done the route probably for several years.
At Historic Point, Basse, in the ice house, we do have an ice saw that is humongous, and it was actually pulled by horses to score the ice out there. Of course, we don't use that because we don't have horses.
Right.
And it's a little bit, this works better for us. But
Yeah.
if you do come to the site,
You can see that one.
a huge ice saw.
Yeah, and that's when they did this on a commercial scale, they scored a lot of this. They cut a lot of it, but they scored a lot more than they cut because it was just too much of a project. You could imagine cutting
Well,
ice.
when you're hauling shiploads of ice.
Shiploads of ice, yes. And another reason why our ice house is probably 8 by 8 or something like that, or 7 by 7. It doesn't keep the ice all year round. It's just because the mass is too small. If the Wakeleys in their day, if we had a picture of an ice house they had, I'm sure it was probably 3 or 4 times bigger, because the bigger the mass of ice, the longer you're going to be able to keep it. And that's the sort of thing we're trying to recreate in what we do in a smaller demonstrative skill and showing at the site in one of our bays of our shed. So it takes up about half of the bay, and it does the job for us and our purposes. Now I'd like to go on to our winter feast, which is on Saturday, February 16th, and that's from 4 to 8 p.m. That's at the Nakusa Community Center. Great facility. We'd like to thank Dan Schmidt and everybody down in Nakusa for the use of their beautiful facility. It's very conducive to what we do in the sense that it's about the perfect size for us. We normally have, about 140, 150, 160 guests. That hall holds like probably 200 or so, and so it's a nice facility for us to use. The event is it is a fundraiser for us. The tickets are $20 a ticket, and you can get them from members or Family Natural Foods, Beaver's dime store in Nakusa, or Jeff Clark and Associates. See Joni Wolf at Jeff Clark and Associates. Their insurance company on A Street South, just about by U.S. Bank is on A Street there, just a block north of that. So got 3 places you can pick them up. We suggest you to get them sooner because we have really a limitation. We print 200 tickets. We don't think we've ever had 200 there, but we've had 180, 185. So sooner you get the tickets, the better. They're always a little more expensive at the door, so it's best to pick them up in advance. It's a good fundraiser for us. You know, all those things we do down there, and a lot of times we charge $1 admission for students and $2 for adults, or $3 for adults. That really can't cover all our costs. So between school groups, Pioneer Fest, Winter Feast, and in memberships is really how we make our money so that we can provide the services we provide to you. In other words, we have to let you know we have no paid staff, nobody gets paid down there, we're all volunteers. And at this time too, it's a good time to remember that we're in the middle of our membership drive. Good time to get a membership, family membership, $25. You know, if I talked to a family that was down there the other day, I know them from church, and they had 3 kids, and I said, why don't you think next time about buying a membership? And I gave them a brochure because I says for $25, and they normally come 2-3 times a year. I says, well, pay for itself after 2 events for them for $25. And so that's $15 for individuals. So if you're just by yourself, or maybe your husband or wife isn't interested in what's going on down there, but you are, $15, and that money helps us to fund and do different things that we do. So certainly encourage you to seek a membership. You can do that by going to one of our events, and we have brochures and membership forms there, or you can contact one of our members, go on our website, Historic Point Basse, P.O. Box 295, Nakusa, Wisconsin, send a check for 15 or 25 or whatever you want to do to that P.O. box, and we'll make sure that you get that membership card back to you and everything. And then everything on site is free, and like Winter Feast that's off-site, those type of events are separate charge for those. But basically we checked it out. I think Jim figured out for me one time, I think it was like saved about $70 or $80 by getting a family membership for $25 versus going to, say, 4 events on the site and paying the individual cost for each of those events. So it's a good savings. It helps us, you know, and we'd like to have you as a member anyway, so that'd be great for you to join us. But the Winter Feast, February 16th, not too far away, about a month as we're recording this. Tom Bramer, who's kind of in charge of the kitchen, gave me a kind of a list of food items. We don't have all of them yet, but we have a great many of them so far. So what we do is we have a wild game, and we have domestic things. So everything is marked. When you go through the line, it's going to say what it is. So if you're a little squeamish and you don't want to try, you know, raccoon or chicken, I mean not chicken, but squirrel or beaver or something like that, you know what it is. So you can try it a little bit if you like, and or not, and you'll know what it is. So we're going to have ham and chicken, gravy, dressing, green beans with butter and onions on them and almonds. German potato salad, that's a new thing. We've done mashed potatoes, we've done baked potatoes, we've done roasted potatoes, and we're going to do the German potato salad, which will have potatoes, onions, hot bacon dressing and everything. So if you like German potato salad, that'll be one of our things. I should mention, as we're going through this menu, I have never known anybody to go away from this event hungry, folks. There's always plenty of food. We encourage you, after everybody's eaten, to come back for seconds if you wish. And as the night progresses, if we got a little bit of something left, we'll package it up and put it out for you to take home with you if you liked it. You know, we might have some extra potato salad or some extra meat or spice, you know, something that you'd like to try, take home with you. We encourage you to take that home with you. So we have raccoon and kraut. We're going to have raccoon. We've got plenty of raccoon this year, and that's always very good. And then we're going to have kraut with brown sugar and caraway seeds, so just plain kraut, more or less. Venison meatloaf. We've had great donations of venison this year, and so we've got a nice surplus of venison, so we're going to have venison meatloaf. And I don't remember that I can remember. Now you got to remember, I'm not a meat eater, so, but I can't remember venison meatloaf before. I remember all kinds of cuts of venison and, you know, different ways we served it, but I don't remember ever venison meatloaf, so that sounds good. Venison shepherd's pie, which will be brown gravy and roasted vegetables with the shepherd's pie, cabbage rolls with wild rice and beaver. So we're going to have some beaver there. We've also had raccoon. We have venison, so we got cabbage rolls, wild rice and beaver with Italian sausage in it. And there's a good possibility of squirrel fricassee. Now, we're working on the squirrels, or somebody's working on the squirrels, I guess. So we hope to have a squirrel fricassee. We'll have all the kind of condiments that you'd like, bread and pickles and relishes and all that sort of thing. We have bread pudding and butter sauce. We got some ice cream. We had a donation of ice cream this year. There's a cranberry ice cream and one other. I can't remember the flavor, but Tom told me about it. Somebody had donated some of these big tubs of ice cream this year, so we'll have some of that. So it's a great, why they call it a winter feast, it is a feast. Originally, this event was held in December, but we found over the years, Larry, that there were so many events going on in December. Christmas parties, you had the Nutcracker in those days, you had all these things. We moved it ahead to February, and this coincides real well with cotillions that the Wakeleys used to put on. We have newspaper articles that talk about the Wakeleys putting on a kind of a, you might say, midwinter party, because people are getting, the winters are it's getting a little long. They're getting tired. They want to have a time to celebrate. There's still not a lot of work to do yet. They're more or less maintenance things around the farm and taking care of the animals. But this was an attempt in a way to have a party and get everybody together, all the neighbors together. And the newspaper articles talk about what a great time people had. They stayed overnight and they had breakfast in the morning, and so we're recreating a little bit of that sort of thing. Also, music-wise, we got a great band this year. It's called Strings on the Prairie, the same one we had last year. It's a group of young people from, I think, the Oxford area, down in that area, Westfield, Oxford area, and they have about 6 instruments. They play in a couple violins. They have a mandolin, a banjo, guitars, all this sort of thing. They do some singing. They call the dancing. We do a little dancing also. I encourage you to partake in that if you so wish. So it's a good evening. In fact, we always call it the fastest 4 hours ever, because by the time 4 o'clock starts and we have a big cauldron of hot apple cider, and we have some cheese and sausage and things like that you can kind of snack on before the evening starts, and people get around and mill around, talk and visit, and people they haven't seen for a while. And then at 5 o'clock, or shortly before 5, we kind of call the people to order and ask them to get their seats, and then we go through the schedule of events for the evening, and then we start them out, one row at a time going through the food area. And then, like I say, it's all marked. You can pick out what you like and what you don't like. Also, keeping up tradition, I think that Stella Michael started, we have gift baskets. We have all kinds of different gift baskets, different themes to them. You buy chances, and then we have a canister in front of each gift basket, and you put in there the ones that you'd like to win. And so your chances are enhanced by, putting 4 in one of these and maybe 2 over here, because you're more likely to win this. But they're a theme for men and for women, for gardeners, for all different things of that sort. So it's another little fundraising thing we kind of roll into this, and so it's a nice opportunity to partake in it. We have a lot of people that enjoy it. I see a lot of people walking out of there with some wonderful gifts, very reasonably. I think the tickets are something like 6 for $5 or something in that order, but Linda Reber is kind of handling that with Paula Clavine and Jackie Urbans, and so a good opportunity for our Wakely Winter Feast. It's a very nice evening, because it's, I'd say half of our people come back every year that have been doing this for maybe 8 or 10 or 12 years. We've probably been doing this, I think it's probably 26th, 27th, 28th year or something like that. Started at the Buren Community Hall in Buren. Of course, when they redeveloped that area, they tore down the community hall. We moved to the KC Hall, which is in Highway 73 west, just out of Wisconsin Rapids. We're there for 7 or 8 years and enjoyed that time there. And now we're at the Nakusa Community Center. It's a great facility. I think the migration from Buren to Wisconsin Rapids to Nakusa is good. I myself personally like to be back in the Nakusa community. We're a Nakusa entity, folks. We're right across the river from Nakusa in the town of Saratoga. We bank in Nakusa. We do all kinds of purchasing in Nakusa. We try to keep the money as local as we can and become a part of their community. And we enjoy them to become part of our community too, in the sense of our historic sites. So we try to center as many things on Nakusa as we can. We've got 3 board members from Nakusa, and we try to keep that, Nakusa connection all the time. So Winter Feast, Wakely Winter Feast, Saturday, February 16th, 4 to 8 p.m. Tickets available at Family Natural Foods on West Grand Avenue, Beaver's store on Main Street, and I guess they call it Market Street in Nakusa. And at Jeff Clark and Associates, see Joni Wolf there. It's an insurance agency on 8th Street South. It's between U.S. Bank and Walgreens there. So just stop in there and you can get tickets right from those folks. They'll have tickets up to a day or two before the event, and then the rest of them will be sold at the door, sort of thing. So, Larry?
I just would like to say at the event too, the food is wonderful, okay, but the entertainment of just being with people that are showing a slight bit of interest to a major interest in our time period in a historic Point Basse is just the conversation. You can sit, a lot of people come at 4 o'clock, enjoy the cider and snacks, and the conversation.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a lot of music playing where you can't hear. You talk. A lot of people. We have round tables there that I see that
conducive
like
to talking.
People, I think.
Yes.
And a lot of people, their family will fill the whole table.
Yes.
But there's always space available and willing participants that are willing to talk about historic Point Basse and what we're about.
And another beautiful thing is that many of us are in costume, which I like, and I think you were alluding to a little bit about talking with like-minded individuals, that you'll see probably 35, 40 people in costume, which is beautiful. The band, all comes in costume, which is wonderful. They're really living the part, so to speak, and we encourage the public, if you want to come in now, we know you don't have necessarily a costume, but blue jeans and a flannel shirt or something like that, hey, that's costume, it looks kind of like, somewhere near the period. So we have a lot of people.
Bring your interpretation.
Yeah, bring your interpretation. Yeah. So it's kind of a nice event that way too, because the camaraderie, like Larry was saying, in fact, people have had Christmas parties there in the past. They brought, maybe from work or something, they bought 1 or 2 tables and they sit down and have their Christmas party there because they like the vibe we have there and what we do and enjoy that, and probably, making this entrance fee, on the cost of the tickets, a contribution to us, and so that works both ways. So it's a great thing. So like to invite you again, Wakely's Winter Feast, Saturday, February 16th. 4 to 8 p.m., Nakusa Community Center. We'll have signs up so you can follow. If you aren't familiar with Nakusa, it's easy to find, folks. You won't have any problem with that. Tickets again, Family Natural Foods on West Grand Avenue, Beaver's Variety Store on Market Street, Main Street in Nakusa, and Jeff Clark and Associates. See Joni Wolf there. That's between U.S. Bank and Walgreens on 8th Street. So like to see you all there. And thanks, Larry, for coming on today.
Thank you.
Beautiful
day.
Beautiful day. Thanks, folks.
This is the very beginning of ice harvesting. It starts about 3 weeks before we cut blocks. We come out on Lake Nepco, clean the snow off. The snow is cleaned off mainly so the ice can get thicker in that area. This year we didn't have that much snow, but in years past we've had to periodically go out and shovel snow for the first 3 weeks. This is about 3 weeks before we cut ice, so we can make sure that the ice is thick enough and control that the snow is off. And also, it's for the future. This fence that we put up is very pertinent to our day of ice cutting. because when we're done cutting ice, we have a hole in the ice approximately 10 by 8 where if it was it would almost be possible for a vehicle to even just drop right in. But mainly we're concerned about snowmobiles crossing the lake and falling in. So putting up this fence is done ahead of time. It probably wouldn't have to be, but mainly it protects us so that the ice is they don't get the tracks from the snowmobiles and the cars, and it just protects the ice so we have good quality ice for our ice cutting. This is the day of the ice harvest. The first thing we need to do is to drill some holes to get our saws started. We drill these holes approximately the size of the ice blocks we want. So if you see there's a hole approximately 12-14 inches apart, and we drill along a line on one side of the hole, and then if you notice where Tom is, the man with the shovel, we will be drilling holes along that side also. So we basically have two lines of a square, and you start sawing into each hole, and as you see as the video continues here, when we start sawing, you'll see where we start sawing and we go through the first hole and then start cutting the other way too, because you need to have enough room so you don't knock into somebody else using the saw. So as this progresses, you'll be able to see that. Now this shows starting the hole. The hole is not that much larger than the saw, so you have to start the saw almost vertical and just start very slowly. And you also have to line up the saw, because if at this point, if you don't line up the saw, you could go way off to one side. So it's very important to get a good start here. And also at this point, we have a good start, we're lined up, and now you can see the different actions of the saw. Back when people used to saw all day, different muscles would get sore. And you see the man in the picture here, he's bringing, at some point, he brings the saw way up, and that's one type of action. If you see him sawing in another action where he kind of bends over and has a shorter stroke, that is basically so you use different muscles so you can keep going all day. That saw should very seldom stop, only to reposition itself. If you can put yourself in that position, that man was either paid per block or paid by the hour to saw, or they were volunteers and wanted to get the job done. So we wanted to keep going. Here's now where you can see where it's very important. You have two saws at the same time. The first man started sawing, and when he got approximately about 3 feet sawed, then the man can come from the other way, so then the saws don't collide with each other. And also at this point you have to be aware not to saw too far one way, because if you saw too far one way, that you have to stand on that ice. And if it has a kerf, if it's sawed through on both sides, it could possibly break off, and you could have an accident where people would fall in. So when you watch this video, you'll see people sawing only so far and then stopping. That's because you have to keep that ice intact where you stand on. Also too, you can see now the accentuated action of the man bringing the saw way up and down. So that's one way of sawing. So you can saw that way for a while, and then when you get tired of that, when your muscles get tired of that, then see, now you change the action. The action goes down. You saw it just for a little while, but basically if he was going to continue there, he would have just sawed in that lower action to use different muscles. And now we're positioning, starting out a hole the other way. See how it takes a lot of care to start that new hole. And also too, you know, now we're trying to work with 3 people, and you have to be very aware of where everybody else is. Right now, I just asked the other man to give me some room so I could start. So now we can get 3 people going. I just had to get my hole lined up so I was sawing in the right direction. Because it's very important, because you'll see later when we stack the ice in the ice house that the more square the blocks are, the easier it is to have a good solid pile. So that's very important to get lined up.